When the front of the barn is dry, mix up a really dark colour using ultramarine and burnt umber. And using the medium detail brush, carefully paint in the shade underneath the roof line and the dark where the weatherboards have actually fallen off the barn. Still with that dark colour on the side of the barn, bring that down. Then with some raw sienna, just push that up into the dark. So it's dark at the top and lighter towards the bottom of the barn. Changing the brush to the half rigger, start to paint in the woodwork with that nervous line. So all this wet in wet texture adds a bit of character to the barn, makes it very rustic. Just drag the colour over the surface just to add a little bit more texture to it. And the barn door slightly open. Some burnt sienna, so it's more of a reddy brown, and just go over the hinges with that sort of rusty colour. With the colour shadow, just put some shade coming away from that barn, just into there. I think we just leave the barn and move on to the trees. I'm going to start on the left hand side with the half rigger, and the colour I'm using is a very pale mix of cobalt blue and sunlit green. Now I don't want this colour to be too strong and dark, so it's a similar colour to these different shades I've started with. So just carefully paint in the trees on the left hand side. While I've got that colour on the brush, just put in the fence as we move across the painting. Then the trees actually at the back of the barn. Now I'm holding the brush upright so the paint flows through the brush out of the end. When you've finished the background trees, we then start on the foreground trees. Using a darker mix this time, this is burnt umber with some country olive. So this mix is possibly more green than brown. Start at the bottom of the tree, push the brush up. That's where the masking fluid is on the sunlit part of the tree. Goes right the way up out to the top of the painting. Same colour on the tree next to it. Some branches. Then with a darker mix of the same colour, burnt umber, country olive. So a little bit stronger. Sunlight's coming in from the right, so you put the darker shady colour on the left hand side of the tree trunk. Just let that bleed into the first colour. It's right the way up to the top of the painting. The darker colour on the branches. Using the medium detail brush, start to paint in some of the smaller branches and twigs. If you have trouble using a large brush like that, you could then move on to a brush like the half rigger for the smaller branches and twigs. country olive, burnt umber. Start to paint in this large tree on the right hand side. Goes up. Then allow that to dry. To add some texture to the bluebells, I'm going to use the foliage brush. Use cobalt blue and some permanent rose. Mix the colour, not too wet. Tap the brush so it opens the brush up. Then stipple some texture onto the bluebells. And just run that across the bottom part of the painting. Wash the brush out, then move on to the fang off. Dark green, this is midnight green. Underneath the tree, just flick up some grasses. Use the end of the brush just to add some texture. Underneath the two trees, again some shade underneath there. Flick up. In the foreground, same colour. And add some grasses into the foreground. With the medium detail brush and the colour shadow, just drop some shadows across the footpath with the colour shadow. Just blend that into the green. So shadow. Dark along the bottom of the painting, then allow that to dry. And now we remove the masking fluid. Clean, dry hands. Rub the masking fluid off with your fingers, just peels off. Grasses in the foreground, some flowers, the fence, and on the side of the tree. Medium detail brush, country olive and burnt umber, but very, very pale. So not too strong. We drop that colour onto the woodwork to get rid of the white. So this is a pale colour to start with. Through there. Some raw sienna and country olive. Drop that colour into the sunlit part of the tree. And while the brush is still wet, if you just rub over the edge, it softens the dark colour we put on earlier, dissolves it, and then push that into the light area. You get a softer edge. So it just blends in. So light colour, then just rub over the dark, it lifts the colour and just soften that edge just a little bit like that. So I'm going to just add some of that burnt umber and country olive so it's just a little bit darker into there. With the half rigger, burnt umber, country olive, so it's that dark colour again. I'm going to put some shade on the fence posts. So the dark colour sits on the left hand side of the upright, and the top rail, a bit of shade underneath. Back to the medium detail brush and some sunlit green. Just wash that green over the grasses, leaving the flower heads. Brush the brush out and finish off the foreground with some cadmium yellow. Just add some extra flowers in. These could be some buttercups or something like that. Just add some extra colour into the foreground. Just drop that into the white. The final touch is the foliage on the main trees. So, country olive, using the big golden leaf brush. Country olive, add a touch of midnight green and just stipple those dark leaves over the top of the main trees in the foreground. So just bring that down a bit. Now try not to overdo this. Remember, it is spring, so it's still early days. Possibly just a little small amount of texture in the foreground, just to add some interest, and also softens these other flowers in the foreground. So there we have the finished picture. I love this painting. It's got plenty of misty trees in the background, a nice strong contrast with the trees in the foreground, detail on the barn, plenty of bluebells. A barn bluebells, totally irresistible and a pleasure to paint. I hope you have a go too.
Now available to buy. Try these techniques at home whenever you wish. The DVD of today's workshop and the book that accompanies this series are now available to order from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.